People living in a Hampton neighborhood say they have been living in terror of a pit bull. They say the dog has attacked several times, biting a woman and even killing a smaller dog. Neighbors say they've made several calls to animal control, but nothing was done about it until now. Robert Boyd has the story.
Well, Hampton Animal Control just removed the pit bull from this house around 7 o'clock this evening, and neighbors who live around here question what took so long. They say the pit bull attacked 3 different pets in 2 separate incidents, killing one of them.
This should have never happened. My dog had a lot of life left in him.
Joe Stillwell was walking his Jack Russell Terrier named T-Bone past his neighbor's house on Saturday when he says a pit bull went breaking through the backyard fence. T-Bone didn't stand a chance.
It was as vicious and as heinous as anything you could possibly imagine. He basically ripped my dog in half. I couldn't get the dog to release.
T-Bone's injuries were so severe he had to be put to sleep. Neighbor Richard York says this is the second time the pit bull has broken through the fence. The first time was in February when York's wife, along with his 2 Cavalier King Charles Spaniels, were attacked in their own backyard.
The pit bull turned on her, bit her on her left leg, knocked her to the ground.
Neighbors say animal control was called again and again, but nothing was done.
It's very disappointing, sad, and disconcerting that T-Bone had to die before anything was taken seriously.
Neighbors say even this latest attack took 3 days to be dealt with. Animal control removed the pit bull Tuesday evening after several calls were made to the city manager and city council.
I don't feel that they're protecting us as citizens very well if they can ignore something like this.
The owner of the pit bull, who has 4 young children, reluctantly turned the dog over to animal control.
Our kids are in the car crying right now because their favorite dog is being taken away because of what happens to be a freak accident.
Jessica Person said she never saw her dog as a threat to the neighborhood.
Everybody else saw her as a threat, but me and my kids and anybody came to the house saw her as like the most loving person.
Animal control declined to speak to 13 News Now. The fate of the pit bull will now be decided in court. In Hampton, Robert Boyd, 13 News Now.
Breaking news in Portsmouth tonight, where police are investigating 2 shootings. The first one happened on Virginia Avenue. Police tell us a boy was shot in the hand. This happened in the same area where 2 people were shot last night. Then around 9:30, a man was shot on Merrimack Drive. We are told his injuries are serious. We will bring you more details as we learn them. A man is facing charges tonight after getting into an elementary school in Virginia Beach. 22-year-old Joseph Miller walked into Thalia Elementary School this morning. This triggered a lockdown. Police arrested Miller after finding him in the gym. The man allegedly got into the school as parents were dropping off their students this morning. Someone noticed Miller because he wasn't wearing shoes. Officials tell us Miller did not come into contact with any children and the students were never in danger. We're also told Miller appeared disoriented.
And the kids pretty much thought it was a drill, except for my son, who picked up on me being nervous.
Officials do not believe Miller intended to hurt anyone. He is charged with trespassing and disturbing the peace. He is in jail tonight without bond. Repairs are underway in a Chesapeake neighborhood after a sewage line collapsed. Crews are pumping human waste from the ground. Meadowwood Drive in Western Branch may be closed up to 2 weeks for repairs. The sewer system is old and the rain only worsened the problems. The sewer lines serve about 450 homes. We're told water service will not be affected. With more rain in the forecast, residents are encouraged to report any additional problems. We know more people are relying on service animals to improve their quality of life. That includes veterans who suffer from PTSD. But we're seeing that there's a lack of regulation sometimes, leaving people with improperly trained animals. Reporter Mona Kosar Abdi has the story.
John Holowinko was 17 when he made the decision to enlist in the Navy.
I was raised in a military family, so I knew exactly what it meant.
But Holowinko says what he wasn't prepared for years later was the return to civilian life.
There, at the time, wasn't programs that they put you through for help.
Which only worsened the PTSD and anxiety disorders he developed.
I don't trust people around me. I got to have my back against walls. I go to the restaurant, eat, I got to have a booth in the corner.
VA doctors prescribed him a service animal, and after a long search and with the help of service dogs for vets, Holowinko adopted a 2-month-old puppy.
It was about 7 months, and I'd start getting fidgety, and he'd start doing stuff like nipping on my fingertips and getting me to pay attention to him.
But because of a lack of oversight from the federal agency, there have been a spike in fake service dogs which have minimal training.
Anybody can throw a vest on an animal and say, oh, it's my service animal.
Holowinko says there is no registry or certification process that distinguishes a service dog from a pet. That argument is at the center of a case involving an Ohio man who was cited by a VA hospital for bringing his service dog, which he claims is ADA compliant, but is not recognized by the VA.
There should be certain steps and there should be a certain inspection process that is involved with it.
Because Holowinko says the ADA guidelines are too vague and leave room for interpretation.
Holowinko is now a lead trainer for the nonprofit group Service Dogs for Veterans. He puts dogs through rigorous training to meet ADA guidelines. Only on 13 News Now, a pizza delivery driver is beaten and bloodied on the job in Hampton. Hampton police say the crook got away with less than $20 and a pizza. Meanwhile, the driver is left with 7 staples in his head, bruises and a black eye. 18-year-old Alex Carlos was attacked while on a delivery last night on Covenant Court. Police say 2 men robbed Alex and assaulted him. He knows the situation could have been a lot worse.
He said, "Give me your money, you're going to die." And as I was reading the receipt to tell him how much it was, he just socked me right in the face.
Alex's mother posted about the attack on Facebook overnight. Since then, more than 2,000 people have shared the post, even asking if they could donate money to help. Police say anyone who can help identify the robbers should call the crime line. A lawmaker wants to stop hoax abductions. You may remember we showed you surveillance pictures of a faked abduction last week. Police in Chesterfield were concerned when they saw a woman climb out of the trunk of a car in a Walmart parking lot, then allegedly get pulled back in by several men. Well, it turns out a group of 19 and 20-year-olds faked it to post it online. They were not charged, but a state senator says she is working on legislation that would at least impose a fine.
Something to recover the cost of the resources that were expended. And if you look at what happened last week, they were actually working on a murder case and their resources were diverted. So I think there is a financial impact that needs to be recovered by whoever is the offender.
Chesterfield's police chief seems to support the idea. He also encouraged lawmakers to stop something like this from happening again. After months of pressure and scandal, Missouri Governor Eric Greitens announced he is resigning. He says the legal costs as well as the impact on his family and friends led him to tonight's announcement. Greitens, a former Navy SEAL, is accused of sexual misconduct and political fundraising violations. ABC's Maggie Rulli has the story.
Missouri Governor Eric Greitens is stepping down.
Today, I am announcing that I will resign as governor of Missouri, effective Friday, June 1st at 5 p.m.
His resignation comes as a special legislative committee investigates allegations of sexual misconduct and political fundraising violations against the governor, with questions of his possible impeachment up in the air.
I am not perfect, but I have not broken any laws nor committed any offense worthy of this treatment.
The focus of the investigation is on payments made by a group supporting Greitens called A New Missouri and their alleged efforts to conceal donations used to benefit Greitens. Hours before his resignation, a judge ruled the group must immediately turn over all documents related to the governor and his campaign. Greitens already faces a felony charge in St. Louis for the misuse of a veterans charity donor list for his political campaign. These recent allegations come on the heels of a sex scandal that rocked the governor's office. A woman who claims Greitens took a partially nude photo of her, bound and gagged, and then sent it to other people without her knowing. Greitens admits to the affair, but denies ever having non-consensual sex or threatening blackmail. Greitens announced that his last day as governor will be on Friday, and he'll resign officially at 5 p.m. local time. Maggie Rulli, ABC News, New York.
Prosecutors in St. Louis say they have reached a fair and just resolution on criminal charges against Greitens now that he is leaving office. Those details will be made public tomorrow.